Hello and welcome to the Android video series again. This video is about view-based animation, or what we call view animation. View animation, we can animate the position, the rotation, the scale of an object in a view, which is a view subclass, some kind of control, let's say, over time. And we can only animate certain attributes. And those attributes that we animate are not sticky. In other words, when we are done with the animation, they don't change. The underlying properties are not changed. So I have a simple layout here, and it has a button, and then I've just taken the hello world from the regular thing and drug it down to be centered over the button here, and this is a text. And if I look at my main activity.xml, I can see that. Now I have the button, it has an on-click handler called animate, and we're going to look at that in a moment here when we look at main activity.java. And of course I pulled the string button text out of the strings XML file, and in strings it's defined as being animate. So view-based animation relies on playing a XML file and applying it to some view, some subview of the main view. So let's look at animation XML. Over here we can see that in the resource folder I have created a folder, and the name of this folder must be ANIM for animation, anim. It must be anim. And then underneath that I have created an XML file using the set as the root class. And this is usually what we do. We usually use set. And let me show you that. If we right click the anim file and say new and then Android XML file, then I use the set based animation. I name it whatever I want to, and then that will create the template for a new animation file. So now if we look at this file, we can see this. I'm sorry, that's the strings XML. If we look at the animation file, we'll see that it's just an XML file, and it loads up the schema in the set tag, which is the root of this XML file. And then I've done a translate animation. Now the duration is 500, and this means this means actually 1/2 second. So this is in milliseconds. The from delta, from x delta and from y delta, is the starting position. Now, if it's the offset of the starting position, and what this says is, I don't want to change the starting position of whatever I'm going to be animating. Just leave that alone at the beginning of the animation. But then the two deltas, I'm moving it up 100 pixels in the y direction, negative 100. Again, remember that when we were looking at our layout, this corner of the screen is the x, y, 0, 0 coordinate, with x increasing as it goes to the right, and with y increasing as it goes downward. So if I want to move hello world up 100 pixels, I have to move it 100 pixels in the negative y direction, and that's why I'm doing that in the animation. So I have my from and to deltas, and then my duration. And this is very simple animation, and it will apply one animation which moves that text view up 100 pixels over 1/2 second. If I look at main activity Java, we can see how we trigger this animation. My onCreate is just right out of the box. It's a simple onCreate method, but I have also defined an animate method, and we remember that this in the activity main is the button click handler. The onClick is the animate method. So now back to main activity.java. I get my text view, find view by ID with the text view, and then I make a new animation object called move text, and I get that from using animation utils dot load animation with the context and then the animation XML file. So our anim animation, the anim class is created within the r.java class at the time that I make the folder, and then the animation XML is the XML animation that I'm going to apply to the text view. And I do that by saying TV, my text view, dot start animation with the animation. So we can see this is an extremely simple way to animate views. Now, watch what happens, however, when we run. Remember I said that these properties that we're animating here we're not really animating the properties, we're animating the picture of the view. We're making it seem as if the animation is occurring, but actually the properties aren't being animated at all. So what happens when we get to the end of the animation is that this text view will snap right back to the position it was in before, because it is still located at X and Y wherever it is. So when I click animate, instead of moving up and staying 100 pixels north of its current location, it will snap back to its current position at the end of the animation. And we see that here. Now, it's a nifty effect, but it doesn't really change the underlying position. In fact, if we animate the button, then while this button is animating, you would think that perhaps we would be able to click it during its animation, and in fact we can't. What would happen is, if we animated this button, its click space would still be here, even though the button was maybe up here someplace. And this, for a user, is fairly odd. In view-based animation, we must remember that the actual position of the object that we are animating doesn't change. Only the picture of the object that we are animating changes. So how do we fix this if we need to? We have to turn to property animation, in which we're actually animating properties of an object. And that can be any property of any object. So if we can get away in our application with view-based animation, we certainly should, because it's a much easier way to do things. But if we need to animate something in which case the actual ending value is changed over time, then we must turn to property animation. And that's the topic of our next demo. Thank you.